Welcome to more accessibility basics. So right now I'm going to go through some of the things that you can use to guide all of your work from here on out, and hopefully we can fix some problems you've had in the past. We're going to start with the real basics, which is fonts. The fonts that are accessible right now are Arial, Calibri, Century Gothic, Helvetica, Lato, Tahoma, and Verdana. There are some other fonts that actually are accessible, but for now, I recommend that you pick one of these fonts and start switching over everything. Switch over your Word, your Excel, your PowerPoint, and your email, please, to one of these fonts. It's going to start making a difference and make things a lot more accessible. These are fonts that can be read by a screen reader, which is why they're so important, because they are what we call sans serifs. They basically don't have any squiggly bits. They're also a lot easier for people to read if they have just general difficulty reading. Those of you who are getting a little older and using readers, you know these are going to make it a lot easier for you as well. So again, we're not just helping our people who need screen readers, but we're helping people who maybe you're getting a little tired at the end of the day. Other things you have to take into consideration are accessible colors. I don't think I have to remind anybody, do not use yellow writing on white background. But if you start looking at these, this has a lot to do with color contrast. You might be able to very easily read the red words, but someone who has some color contrast problems is going to have an easier time with the darker colors. So I do recommend you avoid those ones that are here up at the top and move more down toward the ones at the bottom. Use a dark red rather than a regular red, a dark blue rather than a bright blue, and you're going to find it's a lot easier for your readers to access. Also take into consideration highlights. You can see the difference here. I can tell you my accessibility checker said none of the ones on the top were accessible. So if you're using a highlight, choose a light highlighter, just like you would have in school when you were highlighting your textbooks. That is, if you use a darker one, you're not going to be able to read. It's going to block out those words. So look in terms of using a more accessible highlight. There's also different styles and headings. Now, I'm going to go through this more when we actually get into Canvas and see how this works. But you want to make things that are headings, and you want to use those in an organized format. Just like you learned when you do an outline, you use those different headings and outline in an outline. That's important when you get into a screen reader as well. The screen reader will read those in order and will get confused if they're not in order. Yes, you can just change the font size, but in truth, as we'll see when we get into Canvas, it's going to be easier to use those heading settings than even to change the font size, and it's going to be better for the screen reader as well. So keep those in mind. One thing that does get confusing in Canvas is there's no heading 1 as an option. That's because the title in Canvas actually is your heading 1. So that's why it starts at heading 2. Our next thing is links. This is the old way. Now, if you think of a screen reader reading this, if you use this old long term, a long thing, imagine that being read out. Imagine having to sit there hearing HTTPS www. Oh my God, by the time they actually get to clicking the link, they're bored already. So we're moving into a better way to do links. Now, some people came up with this newer link of click on this link. You know what? Honestly, do you have any interest in clicking on this link? It doesn't tell you what that link is even about. Why would you click on it? Which is why we're moving to the best way, which is telling them what that link is all about. Click on measuring your taste buds experiment in order to learn more. That's going to make them a little bit more interested to go off and learn about this experiment in this case. So think about that when you're putting in links. It just takes a little second. We'll show you exactly how, and it makes it so much more readable and so much more interesting for your reader. Alternative text. This is a big one because if you are visually impaired, you can't read what this actually is all about. It's a fun little graphic, and you need to make sure that you put in some information so the screen reader can tell you what that's all about. Now, in this particular case, how do you do it? It's easy. You simply right click on that picture and you get this as an option. Down here, you'll see an option called View Alt Text. That's View Alternative Text. If you click on that box, you'll get this option, and it will give you some guidelines here. How would you describe this if you're talking to someone who is blind or of low vision? Give a detailed instruction. Give the setting. Give other information. Now, if this is something that you're saying is just decorative, you don't even have to do that. You can actually mark it as decorative. I will tell you, those of you looking, going, what about this generate alt text for me? I found that most of the time it generates some pretty bad text, but hopefully as we get a little closer and more things have alternate text, that'll be working a little bit better as well. So these are your options. You can write the text right in there, or you can mark that as decorative. Now, why would you want to mark it as decorative? If you do have lots of images and it might get confusing, it's a good idea to do that. However, I have spoken to people and I said, why don't I just mark everything as alt text so I don't bore you with all of these things? I just put them in to make the class fun. And a good friend of mine turned to me and said, blind people like fun too, Laura. And from that point on, I decided maybe I'll stop doing alt text box. I even put a few little Easter eggs in these and sometimes put little jokes to make it a little bit more fun for people reading them. Now, I do understand if you're using images in order to test people, we're going to have to really work on how to come up with alternative texts that don't give away the answer for a test, but we'll work on that individually. Alternative text choices, for instance, you can, as I said, mark as decorative. You can put something quick in there saying image of blobs, saying they like teachers, or you could do probably a better thing of describe that in detail so that somebody who is having that read to them could really understand that. Now, with all of these different options, how does this apply to Canvas? You've showed us some different things, but let's make it work. Well, that's going to be the next video. I want you to come with me and figure out ways to make it accessible in Canvas. So I hope you enjoy that, and please follow me